Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was kidnapped from Konoha and came back after 13 years later, Naruto x Ino, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Sarutobi looked out over the ruins of Konoha. There wasn't a part of the city that had escaped the touch of the demon. Even now shinobi disaster crews and civilian volunteers fought to keep the flames from spreading as they got the wounded to the already packed hospital. It was a grim day. And there would be another death if he couldn't convince the council to spare the boy. He turned away from the window and continued down the corridor to the council chambers. He paused before the great oak doors, taking a puff of his pipe to prepare himself, then walked in. The council chambers of Konoha were a thing to behold. The main chamber was a large cylinder of white marble roughly 40 meters across and 50 meters tall with a large round table was placed in the center. Rumor has it the first Hokage cut the table from the branches of the first and greatest tree in Konoha, the great oak, and was a symbol of Konoha's might, but Sarutobi was probably the only one left in the village that knew that it was actually just a spare that the first had found in a warehouse and decided to use because it reminded him of his favorite bedtime story as a child. The shinobi of the round table. Sarutobi chuckled quietly at the memory. The night he found out that little bit of gossip was one of the few times he had seen his teacher, brother, truly drunk. As he walked to his chair he took a look at the statues set into hollows in the walls. There was Yamanaka Inako who had first developed the idea of mind jutsu, thus bringing about the creation of his clan. Over there was Akimichi Chozabu who, along with his two brothers, defeated an army of 200 enemy nins but sadly died soon after because of their special family soldier pills. And there, the largest of all the statues, were the Hokages. Each sculpture was perfect, having been carved by Konoha's greatest artisans. Even as stone they seemed to radiate unrivaled power, authority and compassion. The Sandame's eyes lingered on the face of the latest edition. The Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato. It was hard to think that just 24 hours ago both he and Minato had been sitting at the local ramen bar talking about the latest Ika Ika Paradise. They had gotten free uncensored editions from the author himself, but now he was dead, killed saving his home from Kyuubi. Heaving a sigh, Sarutobi lowered himself into his chair and addressed the council. Gentlemen, his croaky voice carried around the chamber. For what reason have you convened this council? Sarutobi-sama, we have come to discuss the fate of the demon. Said one member. Yes, another piped up. That creature is too dangerous to be left alive. What creature? Sarutobi asked. The boy Hokage-sama, he must be killed for the good of the village. We have discussed it and many of us believe that it would be better if the execution was public. No, Sarutobi said. Excuse me, Naruto will not be killed. He replied simply, taking another puff of his pipe. May we ask why? The councilman asked with obvious bewilderment. Other than the obvious reason that he is an innocent child. An innocent child? The man asked incredulously. Hokage-sama, you will see the reason he must be killed if you look out the window. I already have and I saw only the damage done by the Kyuubi, not by Naruto, the old Kage stated firmly. Is there a difference? The councilman scoffed. Of course there's a fucking difference. The shout rang out through the chamber and every head turned to see a woman come through the doors. She was a kunoichi. They could tell that much from the ninja-style pants and sandals she was wearing as well as the junin vest she wore over a red sleeveless turtleneck. She had long wavy black hair that reached down to her shoulder blades and they could tell by her body that she was a good fighter, and the two unconscious guards behind her proved it. But the most striking thing about her was her eyes. They were a rich red, like a pair of rubies, and unfortunately for them they were also narrowed in anger. And when Yuhi Kurenai was angry you had better run. What is the meaning of this? The councilman who had been arguing with Sarutobi raged. Shut up, Kurenai warned. She walked into the chamber and walked around the table to stop in front of Sarutobi. What right do you have to interrupt a council meeting? The councilman leapt to his feet as she passed. She glared at him so hard he was forced to sit back down with a shiver running up his spine. I have every right, she hissed. She turned to face the Hokage as she crossed her arms over her chest. Where is he, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi sighed as he took off his hat and placed it on the table in front of him, massaging his temple to ward off the coming headache. Kurenai, can't we wait till later to talk? He asked wearily. No, I have come to take him and I will. Hokage-sama, who is this? A council member asked. This is Yuhi Kurenai, former teammate of Namikaze Minato, and godmother of Naruto. At hearing this there were murmurings from everyone present. Yamanaka Inoichi stood and asked the question that was on a few minds of the people trying to save the boy. Kurenai, if you're Naruto's godmother, she was pleased to note he didn't say, the demon. Then who are his parents? She looked at the Hokage, who gave a slight nod before she turned back to the council. Well, Inoichi, Naruto is the son of Uzumaki Kushina and Minato. The reaction was immediate. Many members declaring that it was impossible and that she was lying, others asking the Sandaime if it was true. He just nodded his head. He raised a hand for silence, and after the commotion had died down everyone sat quietly digesting this new information. It was Hyuga Hiyashi who broke the silence. Hokage-sama, what is to become of the boy? Everyone perked up at this and looked at their leader with expectation. Sarutobi took a long draw from his pipe, then looked at Kurenai, who nodded, and he let out a tired sigh. We will respect his parents' wishes and he will be placed under the care of Yuhi Kurenai. But sir, we can't let the demon live, it will. The council member's rabble was cut short by a swift elbow to the gut courtesy of Inuzuka Sume. I wouldn't talk too harshly of Minato's son. Both Minato and Kushina were respected by nearly every ninja in this village, ninja who would fight to protect their son. She told him as he slid to the ground. I agree, said Sarutobi. But a few ninja and more than a few villagers will try to harm him, so from this point on the fact that Naruto is the Kyuubi's container shall be an S-class secret. Anyone who tells either Naruto or their children shall be executed, that way he should lead a relatively normal life. Also, I think he should go by his mother's name of Uzumaki, so he will be protected from his father's old enemies from the Third Shinobi War. He will be told everything after his 16th birthday, but the law will still be in effect. Only Naruto can tell people the truth. That is all. Dismissed. As the room cleared, Sarutobi walked alongside Kurenai as they headed towards his office. Neither said a word until they reached the Hokage office, noticing the form of a 15-year-old Kakashi standing guard in a bloody Anbu uniform. Kurenai cracked an eyebrow as she glanced over his clothes. Trouble? She asked. He shook his head. No, I was helping Rin get some wounded out of the market district earlier. Sarutobi flashed through a few hand seals and undid the security seal he placed on the office before he stepped in, followed closely by Kurenai and Kakashi to see Naruto. Gone. He spun around to look at them, who were still staring at the empty crib. Kakashi, locked this place down. I want Naruto found quickly and unhurt. With a quick hi, Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. As Sarutobi glanced over the room again. How the hell did they get past the seal? He thought to himself. Kurenai was still staring at the crib, tears quickly filling her eyes and fear pooling in her heart. Naruto, please be alright. 13 years had passed since that day, but sadly there was no sign of Naruto. However, they never gave up, hoping that they would get some scrap of a clue that would let them know where Naruto was or if he was even alive. In that time, new problems arose for the village. Uchiha Itachi had massacred his entire clan save for his little brother Sasuke. The Hidden Cloud village tried to kidnap the Hyuga heiress to unlock the secrets of the Byakugan, which resulted in the death of Hiyashi's brother, and in one of the worst displays of treachery in Konoha's history, Danzo and his root division of Anbu attempted a coup only to be foiled by the timely arrival of Jiraiya, who had been hunting for signs of Naruto and found out about the attack through his spies. After the failed attack, Root was forced into resorting to guerrilla warfare, and after a few months Konoha managed to get intel about one of their major bases and plan a surprise attack. The battle was short but fierce, but with the element of surprise the Leaf Nins were able to take the base with minimal effort. Kurenai picked her way through the ruined corridor, stepping over bodies and discarded weapons as she made her way to Genma's team, who needed help dispelling some high-level genjutsu. The place reminded her of a sewer, with the pipes going along the roof and walls and the constant sounds of dripping that echoed through the tunnels. She stepped over a large rat and quickened her pace. She was thankful that she had chosen to leave her bandaged dress at home, instead opting for knee-high kunoichi sandals, which had a tight pair of ninja pants tucked into them, which had her kunai pouch and shuriken satchel attached. She also wore her Junin vest over a longer version of her old short-sleeved red shirt, which came out from under the vest to the middle of her thighs with slits down the front, sides and back for increased mobility. To top it off, she had fingerless ninja gloves with metal plates on the back and her forehead protector around her throat. As she walked through the next door, she could see the slight fuzziness in the air, an indication of a strong genjutsu and something that only a genjutsu specialist like her would notice after years of practice. She flashed through the hand seals and focused her chakra to dispel it. She had just finished when a voice called out to her. Kurenai. She turned to see Genma, Senbon in mouth as always, standing with his team next to a large metal door. Glad you could make it. So what did you find? She asked as she inspected the door. It was large, about 3 meters wide and 4 tall, with a complicated lock. Well, we found this thing covered by a strong genjutsu and surrounded by guards. We cleared them but got trapped in the jutsu and have been waiting for you ever since. The door got hit by an explosion during the fight, but it didn't even scratch it. So what are you going to do? Genma grinned as he turned to his squad. All right boys, show the lady how it's done. The two shinobi at each side of the door flashed through a dozen hand seals before slamming their hands onto the wall while shouting, Doden, Suchi Shushuku no Jutsu. Suddenly the walls, floor and roof started to crush the door, compressing it to the size of a small boulder before retracting and allowing the ball of now useless metal to fall to the floor. They walked in as the lights started to come on, illuminating a lab of sorts. They immediately tensed as they sensed movement to the right. They quickly, but silently, moved into the room on the right just as the lights were coming on. What they saw made them pull up short. There, sitting in the middle of the room, was a large cage about 2 meters long, wide and tall. But it was what was in the cage that gave them pause. There was a young boy, no older than 13, sitting cross-legged in the middle of the cage, apparently oblivious to their presence. He wore black sandals as well as black ninja pants and a tight sleeveless muscle shirt. He also had a strange collar around his neck. It looked like it was made of tough black leather with metal rings at the side. At the top of his right arm he had a tattoo, a red and white fox head surrounded by a cog wheel with the number 13 under it. His blonde head raised up as they came close. What Kurenai saw made her breath catch in her throat. His eyes were of the deepest blue and on each cheek were 3 distinct whisker-like marks. Oh, my God, she thought as she inched closer. It's him. It's really him. When she reached the front of the cage she got on her knees, looked at him through the bars. He gave her the kind of look a young child would give when it sees something for the first time, his head tilted to one side and a look of innocent curiosity on his face. Hello, she whispered, not believing her eyes. Hi, he replied quietly. My name's Kurenai. Can you tell me yours? Mine, he asked, pointing to himself. I'm Fox. Sarutobi stood at the window of his office, overlooking Konoha. The attack group sent to the root base had just returned a few hours ago, and since then all the Junin in charge had been in a debriefing with the Hokage. They talked about the prisoners they captured and any intel gathered, but the biggest topic of conversation was the boy that was found. So he's been with Root this entire time. This proves that Danzo has been plotting behind my back for quite a while. I just hope that old war hawk didn't do too much damage to Naruto, although, he does seem alright. But what about those files Rin found? Sarutobi thought back to what Kurenai had told him had happened. Flashback no jutsu, My name's Kurenai. Can you tell me yours? Mine, he asked, pointing to himself. I'm Fox. Fox. Kurenai thought. What does he mean he's Fox? Did I get it wrong? Is this not him? No. If you took away those whisker marks, he'd be a mini Minato. Oh Naruto, what did they do to you? Reaching into the high neck of her shirt, she tuned her communicator to a frequency and spoke. Team 4 to Team 2. Team 2, please come in. After a few seconds of static, she received an answer. Team 2 here. Whatcha need, Kurenai? Rin, I'm in Sector 6C and I've found something you need to see. Something interesting. Define interesting. Kurenai smiled and said, we've found lost legacy. Silence. Then a whisper came through. What? We found him, Rin. We finally found him. This time Kurenai didn't have to wait for a reply. Don't move, I'm on my way. She flicked off the radio and she looked back at Naruto. The boy seemed to have not taken his eyes off her once and just sat there with a slightly confused look on his face. Are you my new master? His voice was soft yet had an almost undetectable tone of, was that authority? What would make you think that? Kurenai had to be careful of how she handled the situation. She didn't have any idea of his mental state, and being locked in a cage just caused further suspicion. Well, usually the only people who visit me are either my master or my teachers. My teachers come round all the time, but I've not seen my master in a long time and was beginning to think something had happened to him. Kurenai thought for a moment before asking, Nah. Fox, could you tell me your master's name? He thought for a few seconds before he looked back at her. I don't know. He just told me to call him master and punished me if I didn't. Okay. Well, can you tell me what your teachers taught you? Another pause, then. No, but it's weird. What's weird? When my teachers came and got me, they took me into a big training hall, then, he pointed to his neck. They took my collar off, then the next thing I know I wake up here feeling tired. Before Kurenai could ask anything else, she sensed someone coming up to her from behind, fast. She whipped out a kunai and spun on her heel into a low defensive stance. She relaxed when she heard Rin's voice and she ran to the door. Renee. Kurenai, where is he? Rin came flying down the passage and ran towards Kurenai. Masaki Rin had changed a lot over the years. In place of the little girl stood the woman she had grown into. Standing roughly at the same height as Kurenai, her soft brown hair had grown out a little and was now tied back in a short ponytail at the base of her skull. She wore the regulation black shinobi sandals and shuriken satchel, but that was where any similarity to a regular Konoha ninja ended. On her legs she wore baggy dark blue pants, like those of regular civilians, that hung over her sandals showing only her toes. Around her waist she wore 2 white belts which dangled down either side of her hips, hung with bandages, syringes and other medical equipment which was held together by a buckle made from her forehead protector. However, it was her vest that made Rin unique. Instead of the normal forest green, her vest was a pure white, with sheaths for kunai sewn around her chest and abdomen that wouldn't restrict her movement and had the symbol of Konoha Shinobi Infirmary on the back. She slid to a stop in front of Kurenai, only slightly out of breath. Kurenai, you actually found him? Yes, but Rin, there's Sam. Well, where is he? Can I see him? Is he okay? Yes, in a second, but first. What the hell is he doing here? Did those bastards do something to him? Oh, I'm going to kill Rin. Kurenai finally had enough and grabbed the ranting girl by the shoulders and shook her roughly to get her to calm down. Yes, he is here, but there are some things you have to know before you see him. Now, first thing you should know is he doesn't go by Naruto. As far as he's concerned, his name is Fox. Now, this is most obviously a codename, so that's not really that important, but just so you know, you should call him Fox for the time being. Another thing, he mentioned something about training, but what's strange is the collar around his neck. He told me when he's taken away to train, they take the collar off, he loses all memory of the training until he's back in his cage. Cage? They keep him in a cage when he's not training. That's the other thing I wanted you here for. You see those filing cabinets? She pointed to the large cabinets against the back wall of the lab. Rin nodded. I want you to go through them and see what these bastards did to him. Rin gestured to the door leading to Naruto's cage. Can we at least let him out? No, we don't know if he's in that cage for a reason or if they're just heartless pricks. Kurenai could tell Rin wanted to argue more but could see the logic behind her actions. Finally she sighed and started going through the many files while Kurenai went back to Naruto. She sat in front of him and crossed her legs. Fox, I'm going to ask you some questions if that's okay with you. He nodded. Okay, for starters, how long have you been in this place? He shrugged his shoulders and said, forever, I guess. She nodded and after a moment asked, do you know what you're getting training for? They just tell me it's for missions. Kurenai sighed as she realized that she wouldn't get any helpful information from Naruto because of his mysterious amnesia. Why are you here? She looked back up at him. We came here because this is a base belonging to a group of traders from Konoha. The Hidden Leaf. She raised an eyebrow and asked, you know of it? Yeah, I know a lot about Konoha. He grinned. How? They give me stuff to study and it's always about Konoha. She smiled and asked, what kind of stuff do you know? He adopted a thinking pose and started. Well, I know that Konoha has a civilian population of around 30,000 and a ninja population of 10,000. It has one of the best mission income rates of the 5 great shinobi nations. It's surrounded by senju trees, named after the first Hokage who created Konoha and its forests. The Anbu are a specialized force made up of the best ninja in the village and answer only to the Hokage. The Anbu is split up into 5 departments including torture and interrogation, hunter nin, information, assassination and the infiltration unit. Their respective commanders are Morino Ibiki, Asika Moki, Yamanaka Inoichi, Mitarashi Anko and Iba Sato. There are a maze of tunnels running underneath Konoha and the surrounding area used foe. Kurenai raised a hand to cut him off. Wait, how do you know that? The information he was giving her started off as mild tourist facts then moved on to highly classified military secrets known only to those of Junin level and above. Secrets which could be very dangerous in the wrong hands. I'm just told to memorize everything they give me to read and I'm punished if I don't. Sounds like Danzo wants him to know everything about Konoha and its military, but why? What reason could he have for making Naruto memorize facts that he himself already knows? Kurenai was broken out of her reverie by Rin calling her name. Standing and making her way back into the lab to find Rin sat at one of the desks surrounded by files. Pulling over a chair of her own, Kurenai plopped down across from her and put her feet upon the table. Found anything? Rin nodded. A lot actually. Well, for starters, he's been here the whole time he's been missing, so all these files should be brought back with us. His medical records show no illnesses or infections of any kind, ever. Must be his tenant taking care of him. Stupid fuzz balls, good for something, I guess. In fact, if it wasn't for him, Naruto-kun may not be alive. She finished grimly. Why is that? Because those traitors have decided to turn him into a weapon. He's had numerous improvements added through both surgery and mental conditioning. Kurenai picked up a printout and tried to understand all the graphs and numbers. Like what? Oh man, where do I start? Well, you know that a regular person has 361 chakra points, right? Well, through some warped parody of the standard chakra healing jutsus that seal wounds in the chakra circulatory system, the medics here have actually added more chakra points. Now Naruto-kun has 400 chakra points. This is probably to help him manage his own large chakra capacity and take care of any flux from the Kyuubi's chakra. As well as this, they've altered his brain chemistry in the area of his brain associated with personality. Do what? They deliberately gave him multiple personality disorder. Why would they do that? I don't know, but I do know it has something to do with that collar. Look familiar. She passed Kurenai a pile of close-ups of the collar. She saw what Rin was talking about when she saw a close-up of the inside of the collar. Suppression seals. Bingo. From the look of them, they keep his other personalities suppressed while he wears the collar. Kurenai, if we're going to take Naruto-kun home, then we need to talk to this other personality before we let him out into public. It says here he's been using the Kage Bunshin training method since he was first able to channel chakra at age 3 for 12 hours a day, every day. Look at his teachers, Lohiko, Johi, Anita. Some of the best Root has to offer, and they're all teaching him. By now this side of Naruto-kun is easily Junin level, maybe even Kage level. Then what the hell are we supposed to do? Root trains its members to be totally emotionless and totally loyal. If we can't break that loyalty, then Naruto will be put in a cell for the rest of his life. It was at this point Rin's face broke into a smug grin. Oh, I don't think that'll be a problem. Look at this. She passed Kurenai a letter that had only arrived a few days earlier, if the date was anything to go by. Kurenai read over it before she looked up at Rin, confused. Project Fox to be terminated following charges of severe insubordination and refusal to follow orders. Project Fox considered too dangerous to continue. What the hell? That's what the base commander thought as well, so he sent a letter back to Danzo trying to find out what was going on. Rin started to chuckle. Turns out Danzo tried to get Naruto-kun to assassinate the Sandame. Kurenai frowned. I don't see that is something to laugh about, Rin. If Naruto is as strong as you say, then Hokage-sama could have been in serious trouble. Still grinning, Rin answered, you aren't listening to me. I said he tried to get Naruto-kun to assassinate the old man. Apparently Naruto-kun refused point blank to follow his orders. She started laughing again. Kurenai blinked. Now she was even more confused. Wait, that doesn't make sense. Root operatives are taught to follow orders to the letter from a young age. For one to refuse to follow orders is unheard of. Rin just laughed louder. Yeah, but Danzo thought too far ahead. While he was training Naruto-kun, he was already imagining himself as Hokage and that his little coup would work, so he taught Naruto-kun to give his loyalty to Konoha and the Hokage, not to Root and its commander. Kurenai started to smile as well. So he just stopped following Danzo's orders. Yeah, actually it's been a long time coming. There are transcripts from all Naruto-kun's mission briefings and debriefings, and a few months ago he started to question orders, saying that they were hurting Konoha more and more, and that wasn't what Leaf Shinobi stood for. Finally, when he was told to kill off the Hokage, he realized that they were not working for Konoha's benefit. He told Danzo to fuck off. Now Kurenai was laughing. He said that. Rin just shrugged. Well, not in so many words, but still. Kurenai just shook her head and said, he really is his father's son. Yeah, they were both bad at following orders. The women's laughter drew Genma over from his squad. And what's got you two hitting a giggle fit? Kurenai looked over her shoulder at him and winked. Disobedient blondes. Genma just smiled. Yeah, well, Konoha been without one of those for a few years, so what do you say we pack up and head out? Absolutely, Rin said as she stood. Feels like forever since I've had some sweet ramen. Kurenai just shook her head. I don't care how good a Hokage he was, I still say Minato was a bad influence on you. Asterisk 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 asterisk, flashback end no jutsu, asterisk 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 asterisk. The Hokage turned to sound of knocking at his office door and called, enter. The door swung open to admit the now grown-up Kakashi. He hadn't changed much over the years, his silver hair still stood at that gravity-defying angle, his forehead protector still covered his Sharingan eye, most of his face still covered by a black mask. In fact, the only things that had changed were the standard Junin uniform that replaced his Anbu one and the copy of Ika Ika Paradise that appeared to be glued to his hand. We're ready downstairs, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi nodded, and together they walked down to a rather deserted corridor on the first floor of the Hokage Tower. They walked up to a door marked, janitor's closet, and went inside. The room was rather dusty and filled with cans of paint, bleach, mops and other maintenance equipment, and lit by a single flickering light bulb. Sarutobi reached up and tightened the bulb so there would be uninterrupted light, and as he faced a pile of boxes stacked against the wall. Biting his thumb, he preformed 5 hand seals and slammed his palm into the pile of boxes, which caused it, and part of the wall behind it, to swing open, revealing a set of stairs leading into an underground tunnel. This door was one of 50 spread out across Konoha, camouflaged as everything from wishing wells to barrels and paintings to waterfalls. The only people who know of their location are Anbu agents and the Hokage. Even Junin who haven't been in Anbu can only enter if they are being escorted by an Anbu. The tunnel complex serves as the HQ of the Anbu and, during a war, is used as command central. The tunnels run under every street in Konoha and branch out into the surrounding forest, which allows them to be used for covert movements during peacetime and can be vital for offense or defense during an invasion. The Hokage and the Junin walked down the tunnel, passing the odd Anbu or office, until they finally came to the maximum security wing of the torture and interrogation department. Ignoring the screams coming from behind some of the doors, they stopped outside of cell 246 before they were waved in by the guards. The interrogation cells aren't built for comfort, they consist of cement walls, ceiling and floor stained with the blood, sweat and urine of countless victims, the vile fluids left to drain through a metal grill in the floor. This particular cell at the moment was filled with Anbu standing at ease, but on guard, against the walls. In the very center of was a stainless steel table with 3 chairs. One was occupied by Yuhi Kurenai, still in full uniform. And another was taken by Naruto, minus his shirt and sandals but still wearing his collar and pants, who also had cuffs around his hands and legs securing him firmly in place. Rin stood at attention over his right shoulder. Sarutobi stood with a smile as he took in the sight of the boy he hadn't seen for 13 years. His face was fine and handsome, any traces of baby fat was removed thanks to years of hard training, with his sun-kissed blonde hair falling around his face. His body was toned but not overly so, with the faint outline of a six-pack and other muscles. His body was built for flexibility, speed and power. Even though they were invisible right now, the guards found storage seals on the underside of each wrist, empty of course, capable of holding 50 shuriken or 25 kunai each. Just by looking at him, Sarutobi could tell that when he fought, Naruto had a good balance of taijutsu, genjutsu and ninjutsu, not relying on any one of them as most do. The boy wasn't overly tall for his age, but he certainly wasn't short. Dear God, he looked just like his father. Taking the last remaining seat, Sarutobi folded his hands in front of him and started, "Well, Fox. Welcome to Konoha. I assure you these surroundings are just temporary and we'll get you on your way soon. Do you know who I am?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, you're the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen." "That's right, and do you know why you're here?" "Kurenai-san said you wanted to check out my collar." "Yes, but before we do I'd like you to tell me anything you can about your collar." I don't know. I've always had it since I was a kid. I always wear it and whenever it gets taken off I black out, but if I try to take it off it won't budge." Sarutobi nodded, then said, "You say you don't know your master's name, but can you give us a description?" "Sure. He was old, he had one arm, bandages over his face and body with 2 scars on his chin that crossed each other, and he walked with a cane and a limp. That just confirms my suspicion that it was Danzo. I should have known to keep an eye on him when the Kyuubi was sealed into Naruto." Can I ask something?" Sarutobi looked back at Naruto. "Of course. When we're done here are you gonna send me back?" The old Hokage raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to go back?" "Not really. I mean they took care of me and I'm grateful, but..." Kurenai leaned forward slightly to look him in the eye. "But, my master was kind of mean sometimes. There was this doctor that used to look after me, Dr. Nika I think her name was, and one day my master came to see her. He was mad. He was saying something about a test subject failing. She was crying and asking him to give her another chance. He just said, 'Failure is not an option,' and then his 2 guards killed her. I really liked her too." "Well, don't worry, you don't need to go back. Now if there's nothing else we should check that collar of yours, okay?" Naruto nodded and bared his throat and allowed Sarutobi to examine the rather simple device. It was built to survive the elements, being made of thick leather, and the band was about an inch wide, with a metal clasp holding it closed with 2D shaped rings on either side of the clasp. The suppression seals would be on the inside of the collar so as not to attract attention. Sarutobi took in every detail before he nodded. Now Fox, we're going to take it off and see what happens, okay? Naruto gulped then nodded once. Sarutobi gestured to Kurenai and she moved forward. The Anbu tensed as soon as she moved. They had all been informed of his skills and the fact that he had received orders to kill the Hokage and they weren't taking any chances. The collar came loose with a sharp click and Naruto's body slumped in his chair, his head down. Like a puppet with its strings cut. For a moment the only sound in the cell was Naruto's steady breathing before Kurenai broke the silence. Fox. Naruto's head snapped up and Kurenai gasped. His eyes were empty. No anger, no fear, nothing. It was as if they were dead, all trace of emotion was gone, replaced by cold, unforgiving pits. It was as if someone else was wearing his form. And that someone would kill without mercy or regret. Are you okay, Fox? I'm fine, Kurenai-san. His voice was a cold monotone. Sarutobi cleared his throat. Fox. I was wondering if you could answer some questions. Naruto sat up straight and nodded. Well, first I would like to know what you did while you were a member of Root. I was the top agent and bodyguard for the Root Commander Danzo. What duties did you have while you served Danzo? I performed important missions for Commander Danzo that his other agents lacked the skills and/or experience for. Could you elaborate? Of course. All the missions I took part in were S-ranked or above. They included assassination, infiltration, espionage, item retrieval, securing hostages, demolition, delivering high-class orders and leading special investigations as well as protecting Commander Danzo. Sarutobi sat quietly taking all this in. Finally he asked, could you give me a rundown of your skills? Naruto thought about this for a moment before he answered. I received top marks for my taijutsu, genjutsu and ninjutsu. I'm proficient in using swords, shuriken, kunai, hanbo, bow staffs, kamas, scythes, fuma shuriken and senbon. I'm slightly above average in fuinjutsu but there was no seal master in Root to study under so I could be better. I am a very capable tracker and my skills in setting traps are passable. My chakra control is high Junin level. Also I have a wide knowledge of poison and antidotes. I am also able to pick low to high grade locks. Is that all? Kakashi asked sarcastically. Naruto's eyes flicked to him before he added, I'm good at gambling. A few sweat dropped at that and Sarutobi cleared his throat. That's quite a resume. One last question. Why did you go against Danzu's orders? Quite a few perked up at this. Many had their own theories as to why, and indeed how, the boy had turned against the fanatic devotion Danzo had instilled in all his Root soldiers but everyone wanted to hear the truth for themselves. Naruto took a deep breath and let it out slowly before he started. Since I can remember I have been taught that dedication and loyalty to one's village is one of the most important things for a ninja to possess. I have been taught that my life means little when compared to the honor of the village and if it is called for I will die to protect it. I know ninja lead a deadly, and often short life but I gain solace in the knowledge that when I die it will be as someone who died protecting their home. Commander Danzo had not been acting in a manner befitting of a leaf ninja. He has been warping the minds of the men and women under his command to further his own goals. He thinks more of how to gain power than how to improve the way of life for the village under his protection. He taught me that all who go against their home should be punished more severely than any other for they are the worst kind of trash. Since the age of 6 I have been performing missions in the thought that, even though I wasn't in the village, I was being the best leaf ninja I could be and in some small way was making Konoha a better place. However, I was surprised when several months ago I was told to obtain a scroll from inside the village and return it to the base without anyone seeing me. I was confused and asked him why he couldn't just obtain it himself as it would be a simple matter for someone of his reputation and position. He said that he needed it for his plans for the village and it would not be good if certain people know he had taken the scroll. When I asked what he meant he simply said, sometimes the tree must be cut down so that new life could spring forth from the foundation, and sent me on my way. I didn't think on it for too long and returned to my normal routine. A few weeks later, he called me to his chamber again and told me I had a mission. I was to accompany a squad and intercept a Leaf squad transporting a prisoner to Konoha. Danzo said that he was a traitor and that he was to stand trial, but there was fear that he would get off free of charge and would be free to cause Konoha more harm, so he was to be intercepted and killed. Again, I was curious but said nothing. We caught up with the squad a few says later. As per our orders, we disguised ourselves as missing nin from Kusa and attacked. We captured the prisoner and began to make our escape when one of the Leaf nin blocked the way. I thought we would simply knock him out, but the next thing I knew, one of the root members launched a particularly lethal Raiden jutsu, wounding the Leaf nin severely. We killed the prisoner in a clearing and burned the body. He stopped for a moment before continuing. Over the next few months, Danzo ordered more and more missions against Konoha, always claiming to be working for Konoha's benefit, and the whole time I was getting more uncomfortable with the idea of attacking fellow Leaf nin. His face darkened and a few of the Anbu felt chills run down their spines. 1 month ago, Danzo sent for me again. He had a special mission of the utmost importance for me. When I entered his personal chambers, he was sitting behind his desk. He told me that I was going on a mission that would change the very future of Konoha. I asked what it was and he looked me in the eye and said, "You will go to Konohagakure and you will assassinate the Sandaime Hokage." I was shocked. Assassinate the Hokage? He must have been joking. He told me that it was time I served my purpose and led Konoha into a new age where all the elemental nations were under the rule of the Leaf. I couldn't believe what I was hearing and I demanded to know what was going on. He told me all of it. The failed coup, Root being forced out, and the ongoing skirmishes with the village. It was then that I realized that I had become what I always promised myself I would never become. The worst kind of trash, a traitor. I was betrayed and I saw only one way to correct that mistake. I drew my sword and charged. I was determined to make that traitor pay for what he'd done, for what I'd done. I was about to sever his head when I was attacked by other Root members. I tried to fight but was overpowered. Danzo just looked at me and said that I was a traitor to the Leaf, put my collar back on, and I was taken away to my cell where I would have been killed and my body studied. I would have died if that Leaf attack force had not found the base. So the only thing left for me is either to die here as a traitor or fight Root until my dying breath. One last chance to fix my mistakes and atone for my sins is all I ask. Can you give me that chance, Hokage-sama? He bowed low to Sarutobi. The room was quiet as he finished. Some couldn't believe the story they had just been told, others angry that Danzo had turned on them and had used what was without a doubt one of the most loyal ninja the Leaf had produced in the last decade. All, however, were moved by his sincerity in his words. This boy was truly devastated by what he'd done. Even though his voice never changed from that steady monotone, they could tell when he was angry and could hear the sorrow in his voice as he confessed his crimes. Sarutobi, Kurenai, Rin and Kakashi just stared at the boy. They had thought that this other personality would be the pinnacle of the Root forces, totally convicted to Danzo and his ambitions. But what they had just witnessed was the exact opposite. The boy loved Konoha, a village he'd never even seen until he was tricked into stealing from it, and he was willing to die to protect it. Kurenai had tears in her eyes. The look he'd had in his eyes was the same look she'd seen in the eyes of her former teammate. Watching him speak about the village, she saw the same fire that both Minato and Kushina possessed, a willingness to do everything they could to protect their home. Minato. Kushina, your son truly will do you proud. Sarutobi watched the boy throughout his story, and only one emotion was present within the old Hokage's heart. Pride. Sarutobi felt pride rushing through his body as the boy declared to do what he could against Danzo, vowing to do what he could to keep the people of Konoha safe from the old war hawk's bloody ambitions. Even at this young age, Sarutobi could tell that this boy would one day help guide the village into a new era of peace, maybe even as its Hokage. Naruto, my boy, you, without a doubt, have inherited the will of fire. Fox. Naruto lifted his head to look the Sandaime in the eye. You have shown commendable loyalty to both me and to your village. I do not believe that you attacked fellow Leaf Ninja for any malicious purpose or for your own gain, and I believe that if you could, you would have stopped Danzo before he could do any harm to our home. I believe that with your help we can stop these traitors and bring peace to our land. So if you are willing, I will absolve you of all crimes and enlist you as a Konoha shinobi to help protect this village for the rest of your life. Do you accept? The only hint of any reaction to his words was another low bow to the Hokage, Fox's face keeping its passive stare. Arigato, Hokage-sama. Well, that should be. Actually, Hokage-sama, there is one more thing I need to tell you. Sarutobi leaned forward to lean on the table. Oh, what? It's about my other personality, the one Kurenai-san spoke to in the root base. Over time, as this body grows older, the two personalities will merge, I suppose you could call it. We will cease to be two separate personalities and become one. We will each gain the other's memories and skills, but we will become a new person. I would also prefer if my other half was trained as a ninja. Sarutobi's eyebrows shot up. He's not trained. Naruto shook his head. No. Danzo thought that if I rebelled and he could get the collar back on, I would be helpless. He was right. He muttered the last part in mild disgust. Sarutobi nodded. Okay. But one of you will have to be the dominant personality. People are bound to get suspicious if your personality keep changing. The other personality shall be the dominant one. He should fit in more with children my age. If there's trouble that my other self can't handle with his training, take the collar off. Also, we should have different names as to avoid confusion. I'll still be known as Fox, but what will the other personality be known as? How about Naruto? All eyes turned to Rin as she spoke. She blushed slightly at all the attention but said, we could call him Naruto. Sarutobi, Kurenai and Kakashi all smiled at this. It was a way to protect the boy and return that little piece of their lives that went missing all those years ago. Yes, that's a good name. We'll call him Naruto. The newly renamed Fox nodded after a moment of thought. Yes, that should work. Sarutobi nodded at Rin, who moved forward and pulled out the keys to the shackles around the boy's wrists and ankles. As they fell away, Fox stood up slowly, stretching, not wanting to startle his new allies with any sudden movement. As the Anbu filed out of the cell, Fox reached forward and picked up his collar. He looked at it for a few seconds. Maybe now I can put things right. He said it more to himself than the others. He put the collar around his neck, but before he clicked it together, he looked at Sarutobi and spoke. Don't tell Naruto about me yet, he'll know soon enough. With that, he clicked the collar closed and his world went black. Naruto woke with a groan as he felt something burning his eyes. When he opened them, he saw something he had never in all his life seen. He saw the sky. He'd seen pictures and read descriptions of it in books, but he had never seen the real thing. As he looked around, he saw that he was in someone's bedroom. It was rather plain with cream wallpaper and dark wooden borders. The carpet was a warm red and the pine wardrobe was against the wall across from a desk and chair, with the bed against the back wall facing what he recognized as the Hokage monument. After a moment of wondering why he was in Konoha, it all came back to him. Oh yeah, that Kurenai lady said that they were taking me back to their village with them. Wow, so that's what Konoha really looks like. Thought. Why have I got a feeling of deja vu? Man. Last thing I remember, I was talking to the Hokage and then he took off my collar, and then, finding no memory of what happened after that, Naruto decided to find out where he was. Throwing the covers to the side, he noticed that he was now dressed in simple dark blue pajama bottoms and a white t-shirt. He made his way out of the room and into a short hallway. To his left there was a closed door, and directly across from him was the open door to the bathroom. Following the hallway, he came out into a rather large living room. The floor was made of polished wood with the same wallpaper and borders as the bedroom. Plush rugs were laid out on the floor, and on one side of the room large windows, that ran from the floor to the ceiling, led out to a balcony. In the middle of the wall across from him was an ornate fireplace. There was a large 48 inch TV in the corner with a tan leather couch and chair facing it, with a low coffee table in front of them. The walls were adorned with a few pictures and paintings. In the corner opposite the windows was a small, but well-furnished, kitchen. The marble countertops gleamed in the light and the utilities were all a dull chrome. A small table stood in the center of the kitchen area. And standing there in simple red pants and a long-sleeved white shirt stood Kurenai, standing over the stove which was emitting a tantalizing smell. "Morning," she called. Good morning Kurenai-san. I hope you don't mind bacon and eggs for breakfast," she asked him, tilting the pan to show him the bacon, sizzling away. "I've never actually tried it. All they let me eat at the base was rations and nutrient supplements." He hadn't moved from the hallway. "Well," she said as she put the food onto plates. "I'm sure you'll like it, regardless." "Kurenai-san. Yes. What am I doing here?" She stared at him a moment, confused, before it dawned on her. He had no recollection of the conversation they had with Fox. "You said you didn't want to go back to your master, right?" "Right. Well, Sarutobi-sama and I had a discussion and we agreed to let you live here and train you as a ninja." Naruto's eyes widened. He was going to be a ninja. He'd always read about them and thought they were cool and now he was going to be one. "Really? That's awesome. But where am I going to stay?" She an eyebrow. "I just said you'll stay here." His looked at her, shocked. "Kurenai-san, I can't just." She cut him off. "Yes you can. I was the one that suggested it. You'll live here, I will be recognized as your legal guardian and I, along with a few other Junin, will train you to be a ninja." He shut his mouth. He found it odd that she would let a perfect stranger move in with her but felt touched that she would place such faith in him and he vowed not to let her down. "We good now. Hi Kurenai-san. And drop the san, we're roommates now, no need to be so formal. That reminds me, to keep you hidden from your old master we decided to change your name, from now on you'll be known as Uzumaki Naruto." She watched him to measure his reaction. He thought on it for a while. "Naruto. Naruto, sounds cool." He grinned as he nodded. "I like it." She smiled. "Good. Now get over here and eat your breakfast before it gets cold." He walked over and sat at the table with her. Skewering a piece of bacon he sniffed it and finding the smell to be rather tempting he took a bite. Oh, my God. He'd never tasted anything like this before, the flavors causing his mouth to drool and the taste of the juices. The food at the base was shown up in every way, shape and form by this and he promised himself he would never go back to eating rations. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted," he exclaimed, as he dove back in for more. Kurenai smiled a small, sad smile. God, just how much has he been denied in his life? To get a reaction like that from some simple bacon. Not anymore. I'm going to show you all the things in life you've been missing out on. The rest of the meal was finished in a comfortable silence before Kurenai told him to get ready. When he asked what for, she told him they were going to get his new things and training equipment. Naruto emerged from his room clad in black sandals and loose black pants, held up by a black belt with a silver buckle in the shape of the leaf symbol. He also had a white shirt with a large red spiral on the back and a slightly smaller one on the front. After Kurenai changed into a rather strange dress made up of strips of silk with a thorn pattern on them and a red sleeve on her right arm, she and Naruto left the apartment. The day was bright, hardly a cloud in the sky. A cool breeze blew by them as they made their way to the market district. Konohagakure was, as the name suggested, the village hidden in the leaves. The trees grew everywhere, beside the buildings, on top of the buildings, sometimes they were part of the buildings. The streets were wide and, to an outsider, could be confusing. It was all part of the design, a simple but effective way to confuse enemy troops in the event of an invasion. To the east stood the Hokage Monument, a great cliff overlooking Konoha was one of the major, if not the major, landmarks in the Land of Fire. Carved into the solid rock were the faces of all the Hokage. At the base of the monument was the Hokage's office. The village had a bustling shopping scene and nearly a third of the village was taken up by stores and nightclubs, the rest taken up by the clan compounds, residential areas, offices, training areas, the Konoha arena and parks. Naruto and Kurenai walked down the high street, passing stores that sold products for the villagers as well as the ninja. They came to a stop in front of one of the more famous ninja clothing stores and went in. Naruto, having no knowledge of fashion, just let Kurenai pick out whatever she wanted and went with it. In the end they left with 5 pairs of shirts with the same design as the one he was wearing but in different colors, a few long-sleeved fishnet shirts, a replacement pair of black sandals and a few more pairs of pants. When Naruto asked who was paying for the clothes, Kurenai told him the Hokage was covering the cost. Next they moved on to get furnishings for his new room. They didn't need much, so they just picked out some new sheets with a detailed leaf pattern covering it and matching pillowcases, some all-purpose hooks to hang his equipment on, a bookshelf, some red drapes that matched his carpet and even a few posters of famous past leaf ninja. After getting some books that he would study, they stopped at the destination Naruto was most looking forward to. The weapons store. The Armory was Konoha's premier weapons store. Run by famed weapon user Rahoru Bunji, the Armory was the weapon store of choice for many of Konoha's ninja. Ninja clans from all over the Land of Fire would order from his store, and rumor has it that the Fire Lord had his bodyguards' armor and weapons commissioned from Bunji. It was quite large, more like a small warehouse than a store. Every wall was taken up by chrome shelves with racks upon racks of weapons, lit from above by bright lights. The floor was split up into 5 long aisles with the counter taking up the entire back wall. Needless to say, the owner was rather wealthy. Kurenai and Naruto walked up to the counter and rang the bell. After a moment an employee came out from the back. She was dressed in a uniform of a blue shirt and pants with white sneakers. She had medium-length purple hair and a nose piercing. "Hi, can I help you?" "Yes," Kurenai spoke. "We need a few starter pieces for training. We need 20 shuriken, 20 kunai, some weights and maybe a weapon." "Okay." The clerk led them around the aisles showing them the different styles of kunai and shuriken. In the end Naruto settled for normal black kunai but chose some wicked-looking 5-point shuriken. After taking Naruto's measurements, the clerk left to get his weights while they looked at weapons. What a bother. Nearly every weapon was passed up. Some Naruto just couldn't picture himself using, some he couldn't use because he didn't have the right body or height. Strangely though, some gave him a "been there, done that" feeling, as if he'd used them before and that it wouldn't be fun to learn to use them. These included swords, bow staffs and senbon among others, so he passed them up. Even after the clerk came back he still hadn't decided. He was about to give up and was just turning around to tell Kurenai that he couldn't decide on one when he saw them. 2 non-reflective black trench knives. They were full tang, with the part of the blade over the knuckles being more serrated than the rest of the smooth blade, all of which gave of a silver glow which contrasted sharply with the dull black. Practically drooling, Naruto made his way over and picked them up, somehow managing to get out. "I picked these." Over his shoulder Kurenai grinned. She knew just who could help train him to use those knives. After paying for their purchases, they left to get something to eat. There have been many famous ninja teams throughout Konoha's history. Some like the Sannin and Team Yuzuki were world known, while others like the 4th Hokage's team and Anbu 13 were feared in select countries like Iwa and Kusa. They all had one thing in common though, and that was excellent teamwork. However, few have ever reached the level of unity that the famed Inoshika Cho trio have. They weren't a team, they were a family. Every Sunday the old team and their families met up and had lunch. Today they decided to meet up at the Akamichi family restaurant. And then the guy turns to me, pants torn to hell, and says, "I think she wants a refund." The restaurant was filled with the sound of laughter as Yamanaka Inoichi finished telling of his latest mission to the land of tea. The Yamanaka head was seated at the table between his wife Yasu and his daughter Ino. Yamanaka Ino, you could say, was a typical teenage girl. She would fuss over cloths, her figure, Her lazy friends Shikamaru and Choji, makeup, school and a number of other things that would earn Inoichi a free drink at the bar. But for the last few years there has been one topic that has persisted, Uchiha Sasuke. Yes, Ino had a lot to say about the Uchiha heir, such as how he was so cool, how handsome he was, how she would not lose him to her rival Sakura. In fact, she had so much to say about the boy that sometimes Inoichi considered sending Itachi a letter asking his to come back and finish what he started. Anyway, back to the meal. So you kids ready for your final term at the academy? Shikaku asked as he lazily ate his steak. Yeah, as long as it isn't too troublesome. Came his son Shikamaru's drawl from where he sat, sucking his cola through a straw. Should be fun. Kinda sad that it's our last year though. Choji added his 2 ryo from behind a pile of chicken. It should be okay as long as Forehead doesn't try to steal my Sasuke-kun. Ino looked up from her salad to answer. Shikaku and Shuza smiled in sympathy as Inoichi's eyebrow twitched. Well, you better get into your work or you'll fail the exam. The Akamichi matriarch, Ona, warned. The exam is a sham. How are book smarts supposed to help in a fight? You never know. A little knowledge could be a big help. As the debate on how useless the exam was raged on, the bell sounded, announcing a new customer. Kurenai and Naruto entered the restaurant and went to place their orders. After they were done, they were just about to look for a table when a voice called out to them. Yo Kurenai, come here and sit with us. Inoichi called. He'd seen her come in and decided that he'd invite her over. He'd heard that she was back and that she'd found something interesting on her last mission. He wasn't being nosy, she was a friend too, but he couldn't help but wonder. Yamanakas were natural information gatherers and it was in their blood to try know everything. He had no idea who the kid was, but he looked familiar. Ino followed her father's gaze and saw who he was talking to. Kurenai was a family friend. Both she and Ino's mother had a passion for gardening, and had even been over for dinner a few times. She also knew that she was on the fourth's team when he was a genin, and Ino wanted to be a strong kunoichi like her one day. She then noticed the boy behind her and her eyes widened. She'd never seen him around the village before. He was tall with sun-kissed hair and sparkling blue eyes. His arms were well-toned and when he moved you could catch a hint of muscle under his shirt. His face was mature and sculpted and he had 3 cute whisker marks on each cheek which gave him an exotic look. Ino had to fight to keep her blush down. Hey guys, Kurenai said as she sat down. After a moment of nervous hesitation, Naruto sat next to her. How's it going? It's going. Heard you hit that root base at the border. How'd it go? You're the head of the information division, shouldn't you know how it went? Nah. Just got back from AB rank in the land of tea late last night. Haven't had a chance to go to the office. Well, she said as she took a sip of sake. We found something interesting. After a moment of silence, Inoichi prodded. Well, what? What did you find? When? Kurenai laughed at her friend's pout. Messing with Inoichi was one of her favorite pastimes. You'll find out soon enough, was all she would say. Inoichi huffed and crossed his arms. He hated it when she got all secretive like that. Out of the corner of his eye he glanced at the boy sitting beside her. He looked damn familiar but he couldn't place him. Deciding to go out on a limb, he just came out and asked. So kid, what's your name? Never seen you around here before and I know just about everybody. He started drinking his sake while he waited for an answer. Everybody else at the table perked up at this as they too wondered who the boy was. Glancing at Kurenai and getting her nod of approval, Naruto answered. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Kurenai wished she had a camera to capture the scene. Inoichi spat his mouthful of sake over Shikamaru. A piece of sushi shot out from between Shikaku's chopsticks, hitting Ino on the forehead and sticking to it, and Shuza started choking on his chicken and pounded on his chest to try and get it down. The wives and children all looked at them with confusion while Kurenai had to bite the inside of her mouth to keep from laughing. The Junin looked at Naruto, then each other, then at Naruto again before finally bombarding Kurenai with questions. What happened? Where was he? How'd you find him? Guys, I can't say anything, you just have to ask the Hokage. Kurenai calmed them with a wave of her hand. Slumping in their chairs slightly. Any further questions were silenced as more food, along with that of Kurenai and Naruto, arrived. They began to eat in peace before Ino began her traditional, interrogate the hot new guy, routine. So Naruto, I've never seen you around Konoha before, where are you from? Luckily for Naruto, he and Kurenai spent the morning coming up with what would soon be a good background story while they were shopping, and they planned to perfect it over the next few days. He felt that they could get by with what they came up with so far, so he went with it. I've been living with a family friend for most of my life. I'm back to train to be a ninja. Ino cocked her head to one side, confused. But the academy beginner's age is 9 and you look like you're as old as me, so how can you join the academy? It was Kurenai who answered this time. He's not going to the academy, Ino. I'm going to be training him until the exam, then he's going to take it with you three. Ino was shocked. But that's 6 months away. How can he learn 4 years of academy stuff that quickly? Naruto scratched the back of his head and grinned a foxy grin. I'm a quick learner. Seeing that grin, Ino had to fight down yet another blush. She shook her head and looked at him, wondering how smart he must be if he could learn in 6 months what had taken them 4 years. She wasn't the only one. Everyone else at the table was surprised that someone claimed they could get through the academy after just 6 months. After that, dinner progressed rather normally, with Naruto being introduced to the 3 clans, listening to the stories of past missions and the children's life at the academy. He took note of their appearance. Shikamaru wore a gray vest over a mesh shirt, Choji had a white scarf and green coat with the kanji for eat on his shirt, and Ino wore a 2-piece purple dress over some bandages. He found it rather weird. With no prior experience with children his own age, or just other people for that matter, he had no idea what to say, so he did the only thing he could do, sit quietly and try to fit in. This didn't go unnoticed by Kurenai. She knew it was going to be hard for him to relate to others, especially kids his own age. That was another thing Danzo had taken from him. She wanted to help him get to know his peers, but it would be difficult considering his special case. She sighed. There was so much he'd missed out on in life, things he should know, things he needed in order to have a relatively normal life, and one of those things was human contact. She had a few ideas on how to fix this, but she'd look into them later. First, she needed to train him. After the meal was done, everyone split up, heading for their respective homes. The sun was low now, casting an orange hue over the village, and as they walked down the street leading to their apartment, Naruto yawned as he reflected on the past day. He couldn't remember ever laughing that much or having that much delicious food. Without a doubt it was the best day of his life, and he was a little sad that it was over. Kurenai. I just wanted to say thanks. Today's been great. I can't remember the last time I had so much fun. Hey, I don't think I've ever had this much fun, so, thanks. He scratched the back of his head. Kurenai smiled and ruffled his hair. No problem. This is what your life is going to be like from now on, Naruto. Enjoy it. Naruto smiled back, and together they continued on home. They had training to prepare for. If Kurenai ever had any doubts that Naruto wouldn't be ready for the Genin exam before then, they were dispelled now. To say he had talent would be an understatement. He took to it like a fish to water. His chakra control was perfect, as it should be with all those extra chakra points, so exercises like tree walking and water walking he could do without apparent thought. He did have a little trouble at first since this personality had never used chakra before, but Fox's extensive training made up for it. So with chakra control taken care of and with Naruto in charge of his own studying, not that Kurenai thought he needed it, he seemed to know it all already anyway, and him already being in peak physical condition, the only things they needed to work on was his jutsu arsenal, kenjutsu, taijutsu and stealth. Not that hard at all. She had managed to round up some Junin who were willing to help train him. Kakashi offered to teach him a jutsu or two that Naruto wouldn't get from his books, Asuma agreed to help him with his trench knives after ranting for a while because someone finally realized how cool they were. Rin wanted to teach him a few medical jutsu. She would train him in genjutsu. She had somehow convinced Anko to help with stealth, and Maida Guy agreed to help fan Naruto's flames of youth into an inferno, meaning he'd help too. All in all, it was going well. Right now they were going to meet Guy and his team at their training ground. Kurenai had done this for every teacher Naruto had. She would come along on the first day of training, introduce him to his teacher, see how they got on, and then she left. She began easy. Since he'd already met her, Naruto began his training with Rin first. Then a few days later they moved on to Asuma, then Kakashi a few days after that. It was 2 weeks before she introduced him to Anko. That introduction consisted of Anko chasing Naruto around the training field with kunai and snakes to test him. Naruto jumped at every loud noise for the rest of the week, fearing that Anko wanted to play again. So, after gradually introducing Naruto to his teachers, each more eccentric than the last, they came to the king of all oddballs, the spandex-clad taijutsu specialist of Konoha, Maida Guy. Reaching training area 4, they leapt over the fence and walked through the trees. For a few minutes they came to a wide open clearing with 3 training posts, each being 3 meters thick, a few targets attached to the trees, and small bench in front of a lake, most likely used for meditation. The clearing was empty, so they decided to wait by the posts, with Kurenai leaning against one and Naruto sitting on top of another. After 10 minutes of waiting, Naruto got bored and decided to try and balance one-handed on top of the post. Kurenai watched him out of the corner of her eye and smiled. After another few minutes they saw what appeared to be a dust storm approaching, followed by a slightly smaller dust storm. The first cloud reached them and sent Kurenai and Naruto, still balancing, into a coughing fit. No sooner had they stopped coughing than the second cloud reached them and made them start all over again. When the dust cleared, Naruto nearly fell off the post. There, standing in plain sight without a hint of shame or embarrassment, were 2 of the weirdest ninja to ever grace the earth. They both wore bright neon green spandex bodysuits, which thankfully weren't too snug. Both had the same perfectly shaped bowl cuts. Both wore their forehead protectors as belts, and both had, without a doubt, the biggest eyebrows ever created by Kami. Naruto tried to understand what the hell they were shouting about. Yosh, what a most youthful way to start the day. Lee, my boy, that was close, but your flames of youth must burn brighter if you wish to win against me. Yes. Guy-sensei. Now to cool down, let us do 100 push-ups. If I fail to do that, I will do 1,000 laps around the village on my hands. And if Guy-sensei fails to do that, I will run to the border of fire country and back carrying a 5-foot log 7 times. That's the spirit, Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. To top off this vision of creepiness, they proceeded to man-hug, complete with a romantic sunset genjutsu. Naruto didn't try to dispel it. He couldn't. He was frozen. Fortunately, a voice distracted him from this image. Lee. Guy-sensei. If you 2 could stop crying for a moment, you would realize that you're scaring people. A girl walked out from the tree line. She was about a year older than Naruto, with chocolate eyes and her dark brown hair tied in 2 buns. She wore a pink, sleeveless, Chinese-style shirt and a pair of dark green pants, with her forehead protector around her head. Following her was a Hyuga. He had slightly effeminate features and wore a gray coat and black shorts, and for some reason he had bandages covering his right arm and leg. Naruto could tell that he was a branch member as he wore his forehead protector on his head, unlike the main house members who wore them some other way or not at all, proudly proclaiming that they were of the illustrious main branch. His white eyes seemed cold and uninterested. Guy looked up from his hug and saw a slightly annoyed Kurenai and a slightly pale Naruto, which was saying something as the blood was rushing to his head from the handstand. Jumping up, he called, "Good morning, Kurenai-san. I hope you are well this fine day." Allowing a smile to break through, she replied, "Yes, Guy. But if I may ask, what kept you?" "Ah, I believe that is my fault. You see, we were on our way here when I challenged my wondrous students to a race. While we were discussing the terms, my eternal rival Kakashi. Kurenai tuned him out after that. Whenever Kakashi was involved, Guy would rant for a few moments about his cool and hip rival. It seemed that Guy couldn't pass Kakashi in the street without issuing some absurd challenge. After thinking about what to make for dinner that night and wondering if the teriyaki chicken she picked up was fresh, she managed to catch the end of Guy's mini speech. But alas, Kakashi managed to balance on his bowl without dropping his egg while I fell. Yosh. I must train harder if I am to beat my honorable rival in future. Yosh. Guy-sensei. Lee. Well anyway, Kurenai interrupted before they could start to tear up again. I'm here about our agreement. A light bulb appeared to have flicked on in Guy's head. Ah yes. He looked at Naruto. This must be young Naruto. Naruto flipped off the log and landed beside Kurenai, facing Guy. Hi. He bowed slightly. Nice to meet you. Guy waved his hand. No need to be so formal. After all, we'll be teacher and pupil for the next few months. This caught his student's attention. Guy-sensei. He turned to the bun-haired girl. Yes, Tenten. What do you mean he'll be your pupil? I thought Junin instructors could only have 3 genin. That's true, but there is no rule that says a Junin can't help train someone for their genin exam. She looked at Naruto, surprised. You're still in the academy. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Well, no. In fact, I'm not in the academy. Tenten blinked. Huh. I'm going to go to the academy for the exam, but I'm not attending the academy. Oh, yes, so we must do what we can for Naruto in the time we have. He will be training with us every Friday when we don't have a mission. If you'll excuse me, Guy, I just want to have a few words with Naruto before I leave. She dragged him over to the tree line and crouched in front of him to see his face. Naruto, I know Guy seems a little strange, but he is one of the best taijutsu specialists that Konoha has ever produced, so you should listen to everything he says, okay? Okay, Kurenai. She nodded and looked over to where Guy was telling his students that they were in their springtime of youth, then looked back at Naruto. Another thing. You are near and dear to me, but if I ever see you wearing green spandex, I will put you in my yaoi genjutsu for the rest of the day. Naruto shivered. That genjutsu was said to be the most evil of its kind in Konoha today. Naruto remembered one time after training, Asuma and he went back to the apartment for dinner, and while Kurenai was setting the table, Asuma lit one of his cigarettes. He never even saw Kurenai make any hand seals. Asuma just froze for a few seconds, then fell over, shaking all over as Kurenai lectured him about smoking in her apartment. Naruto had to help him home after the meal. But after telling a few male Junin what happened, Asuma was whisked off to the nearest bar for emergency treatment. Don't worry. Kurenai smiled, and with a squeeze of his shoulder she took off through the trees. Naruto walked back to the other genin as Guy prepared them for some sparring. Hey, so you'll really be with us for 6 whole months, huh? The girl, Tenten, asked. Yeah, will that be a problem? Nah. If anything, you'll bring a little sanity to our team. What do you mean? Well, the clone of our sensei, Lee, enjoys training himself to death, and the Hyuga, Neji, has the personality of a spoon. So maybe you can bring a human element to our little group. She looked over at Guy and Lee, then back at Naruto. She seemed slightly nervous. You're not going to turn into another one of them, are you? Naruto shivered, remembering Kurenai's promise. If I do, please grant me a quick death. Tenten grinned. I think we'll get along just fine. Well then. Guy's voice sounded across the clearing. The first thing we'll do is see how well Naruto does in a fight against Lee while Tenten and Neji practice the water walking exercise. As Neji and Tenten left for the lake, Naruto, Guy and Lee stood together. Okay, Naruto, this is just a test to see how good your reflexes, stamina and flexibility. Naruto nodded and stood across from Lee, who smiled and said, Naruto-kun, let us do our best, shall we? Naruto smiled back as he got into a loose stance that Asuma taught him and waited for Lee to attack. He didn't have to wait long as the boy shot forward with a right hook aimed for his face. Naruto spun low to avoid it and extended his elbow to smash it into Lee's ribs, but the spandex child hopped back, dodging the attack, only to come back in with a left kick that caught his head. Rolling with the blow, Naruto managed to brace his hands on the ground and sweep his own leg up, which Lee barely avoided. Jumping back up into his ready stance, Naruto rushed Lee, going for a kick to the knee, which he easily jumped over, but Naruto continued with the momentum of his kick and managed to bring his other leg up into Lee's gut in midair, knocking him onto his back. Springing up, Lee went for a jump kick which forced Naruto to bend over backwards to avoid. When he landed, Lee brought his right leg round in a low sweep and took Naruto's legs out from under him. He had to roll out of the way to avoid an axe kick to the sternum, and he managed to get to his feet only to be sent down again by a spinning backhand. Getting to his feet once more, Naruto was forced back. Out of the corner of his eye he saw a tree which he ran for, Lee hot on his tail. When he reached the tree, Naruto ran up it, kicking off. When he was 2 meters off the ground, he caught Lee by surprise with a backwards flip kick. When he hit the ground, he rolled to one side to avoid being trapped against the tree and was about to attack again when Guy's voice sounded across the field, calling them back. "That was very well done, you should be proud of yourselves. Lee, still good, but you forgot to jump back when he tried to kick your knee, so he couldn't follow through like he did." "Hi, Guy-sensei," Lee cried as he wrote notes in a little notebook. "Naruto, that was very good. I didn't think you would hit Lee once, never mind twice. Your flames of youth are an inspiration to us all." Thanks. Now I have noticed that you have good reflexes as to avoid Lee's attacks and counter them. You don't seem to even be out of breath, so that shows you have high stamina. Also, in the fight you seem to prefer using your elbows and legs rather than your fists. You are thin but powerfully built and flexible, and your arms and legs provide you with some decent reach. After taking this all into consideration, I think I have found you a taijutsu style that is perfect for you. It's called capoeira. What's that? Guy smiled. He loved teaching. Capoeira is a style that was taught to a traveling ninja before he settled in Konoha when it was founded. He traveled to the far west to learn of the different martial arts there. It was a time where slavery was commonplace and even accepted. He was appalled and he agreed to help the slaves free themselves. The slave masters punished them greatly if they were caught practicing martial arts of any kind, so they designed a style of fighting that was disguised as a dance or game, so the slave masters never thought to punish them for practicing it. The slaves all knew capoeira but needed outside help if they were going to be free. The ninja agreed to help, and one night he stole into the slave camp and unlocked all the cells where the slaves were kept. The slave masters were taken by surprise but thought that they could take the slaves as they didn't know how to fight. They were shocked to learn that capoeira was a very effective style of fighting and not just a dance, and they were quickly defeated. The ninja led the slaves to the docks where they, along with the ninja, commandeered some of the vessels and set sail. To thank the ninja for all his help, the slaves did the only thing they could to repay him. They taught him capoeira. The ninja had seen the effectiveness of the style and readily agreed. After he left the slaves, he was a master in capoeira, and a few years later he settled in Konoha, where he only taught a few students before he died. One of his students was my sensei, and he taught it to me after I told him that my dream was to become the greatest taijutsu master that Konoha had ever seen. And now you will be one of the few in Konoha who know the style of capoeira. Naruto was excited. That style sounded like it would be both devastating and cool to look at. How do I do it? Guy spent the rest of the day going through the beginner aspects of capoeira. Unlike other taijutsu styles, capoeira didn't have any katas as you moved in accordance with your enemy. One of the most important things to remember about the style was to keep moving, and it showed in the basic stance, the ginga, where the user would move from side to side while swinging his arms across his chest in a defensive position while moving each leg back and forth, making a triangle shape on the ground if you look down at him from above. The style used mostly elbow strike, kicks, sweeps, headbutts, and a lot of acrobatic work. Right now Naruto was dragging himself towards the apartment, and ultimately, his bed. Looking around, he saw the local nightlife starting to come out. Looking at the couples and the groups of friends, he began to think about what his life would have been like here instead of at the base. He'd probably have friends, and go to the academy like regular kids. Have a family. That was one thing that he'd thought about through the years. He knew he couldn't just appear from nowhere, so he had to have had parents at some point, but whenever he asked, the people at the base just said that he didn't have any. He couldn't do any research in any birth registries, and he was never allowed out of his cage unless it was for training. That was another thing that he found strange. Now that he had Kurenai and the rest of the Junin teaching him, he knew what training was, and he never blacked out, but was often knocked out. He never really thought about his collar before, but now he had to wonder. Why did he have it? What was it for? What happened when he took it off? He shook his head to clear it of those thoughts. If he had no new information, then he knew nothing that he didn't know a month ago. He pulled himself up the stairs towards the apartment door and went inside. There was a note on the table saying that Kurenai had a mission and would be back in 2 days. He picked his still warm meal from its tinfoil wrapping and proceeded towards his bedroom for a good night's sleep. Naruto ran as fast as he could. The trees were blurs as his legs carried him through the forest at untold speed. He ignored the pain in his side as he tried to make it to a good hiding spot before he was caught. He glanced over his shoulder to try and catch a glimpse of his pursuer, but all he could see was the verdant greens and browns of the forest. Feeling that he was safe for the moment, he stopped on a branch to catch his breath. Looking down at himself, he saw that he was covered in sweat, blood and dirt. His shirt was missing and his pants had large holes in them. He sighed. He'd have to go shopping again. Standing back up, he prepared to start running again when he heard rustling behind him. He spun in time to see his predator crash into him, sending them hurtling off the branch to crash into the forest floor below. Blinking away the daze from the crash, he tried to get up, only to find a weight straddling him, pinning him to the ground, and a silky laugh ringing in his ears. "Caught you, Naru-chan," purred Anko as she slid a sharp kunai from her coat. Naruto whimpered. It had been 1 month ago that Naruto was first brought to Konoha, and 3 weeks since he began training. He'd been progressing well. He'd learned 2 new jutsu, Magen, Jabaku Satsu no Jutsu, and Kaden, Hausenka no Jutsu. His form in capoeira was coming along nicely, as was his training with his knives, and his stealth was getting there. Rin had him reading up on the human body as she wanted him to be completely aware of what was possible for the human body before she taught him medical jutsu. He didn't mind, he liked reading. Currently Naruto lay in his bed moaning pathetically, with Rin fussing over him and Kurenai scolding Anko. "How many times do I have to tell you not to go overboard? He's fine. He came back in one piece, didn't he? You had to carry him back after he passed out from blood loss. You worry too much, Kurenai." Kurenai just threw up her hand in exasperation and moved to the bed where Rin had just finished giving Naruto a checkup. "How is he?" she asked the medic. "He'll live, just a little tired." "See, told ya," Anko chirruped. Kurenai glared at her fishnet-clad friend and moved into the living room, Rin and Anko following behind. She made them some tea and they sat on the couch in silence before Rin spoke up. "Sarutobi-sama says he needs to tell the council about Naruto-kun." Kurenai sighed. "I know. He said he wants you and me there when he presents the files we found to the council. How do you think it'll go?" Kurenai sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Well, I doubt the Inoshika-cho families will be a problem, as they have spent time with Naruto and they were friends of Minato. The Inuzukas would most likely accept him, but their loyalty will be absolute when he proves himself to the village. The Aburame would be highly logical and reserve judgment. I don't know about the Hyugas, but Hiyashi was a good friend of Minato's when he beat that fate crap out of his head. It'll be the civilians that will try to stir things up though." Anko snorted. "Let 'em say what they want, civilians don't get a choice in things like this. Still, they could cause some animosity towards Naruto-kun." Rin commented. "Wouldn't really matter if they did. Ninja and civilians don't exactly run in the same circles. Yeah, but it is the civilians that run most of the stores. They could make life difficult for him. Kurenai scowled into her cup. Ah well, Anko supplied. We'll cross that shit creek when we come to it. The others chuckled lightly at the typical, Anko, response. The sound of blades clashing rang throughout the clearing. The combatants stood in the center trading blows. The taller of the two was always centered and never moved. The shorter one was in constant movement, spinning, slashing and flipping trying to land a blow. The short one brought his blade swinging up in a vertical arc only to be blocked. A kick was directed at his side but he flipped sideways over it, only to see a reverse kick coming straight for his face. He braced his hands flat on the ground behind him as he tried to duck backwards under the attack only to collapse to the ground with a cry of pain. The taller one looked down at him with slight concern. You okay, Naruto? Asuma asked as he helped his part-time student to his feet. Yeah, he groaned as he got up. What happened? Naruto sighed. It's the knives. Every time I try to brace my hands on the ground they get in the way or bend my fingers painfully. He looked at his knuckles where the trench knives had dug into them when he pressed his palms to the ground. Apparently capoeira and knife fighting didn't mix well sometimes. Asuma sighed as he ran a hand through his short beard in thought. They had been trying to blend Naruto's knives with his taijutsu but it was slow going. Some of the moves required the hands to be pressed against the ground to give the user leverage to help perform flips and cartwheels. He groaned. Now they had to go and see Guy. Not that he didn't like Guy but he was a lot to handle sometimes. Oh well. Naruto was one of the few who recognized the utter coolness of trench knives and if he had to deal with Guy to pass on his art then so be it. They made their way out of the Sarutobi family gardens and out the front gate of the compound. As they made their way into the market district Naruto noticed something. Some of the villagers were giving him dirty looks and muttering about him. Thankfully those looks were few and far between. They had started about 2 weeks prior. He'd asked Kurenai about it but she just told him to ignore it so he did. Asuma also saw the looks. He'd been told by his father that the council had to be informed of the recent developments and it went surprisingly well. Apparently Naruto being away all those years helped people move on and only 2 or 3 people on the council still bore a grudge against him. When the general population was informed it was the same, the majority was neutral but there were some who couldn't escape the past and blamed the boy for the tragedy. Naruto's life wouldn't be in any danger or change in any dramatic way so there was no problem. The few who glared at the kid got a healthy dose of killing intent, courtesy of Asuma. When they reached Team Guy's training ground they entered the clearing in time to see Neji send Lee sprawling into the ground. I have told you before Lee, fate has decreed that you will always lose. The Hyuga prodigy said as the green-clad teen struggled to get up. Naruto frowned. He got on well with everybody on the team except Neji. He just couldn't stand his way of attributing everything to fate. His shitty attitude was another reason. Lee and Tenten were the closest things he could claim as friends and he didn't like the way Neji always degraded them. In fact sometimes he wanted to send the young Hyuga through the nearest tree. Guy, Asuma called as he lit another cigarette. The spandex nin turned at the call and smiled widely at the approaching duo. Ah, good morning Asuma-san. I hope you are well this fine day. Asuma shrugged. As well as a smoker can be. We came because we need your help. They explained the problem with the knives to Guy. Guy looked thoughtful and asked Naruto to give a demonstration. Naruto obliged and went through a few exercises with his knives and capoeira when the same happened. Guy thought for a moment before inspiration struck. He took the knives and told Asuma and Naruto to watch closely as he mixed the fighting style and knife fighting together. It took Naruto a moment to realize something. You're not using your hands. Guy nodded. Yes, it appears that you could still fight with the knives and utilize your taijutsu if you don't use your hands for the flips. If you do handless flips and use more rolls and sweeps or use your elbows and forearms when you need to brace yourself against the ground you should be able to incorporate your knives into your fighting style. If you refine and master it you will have created a new branch of capoeira. Asuma chuckled. Hear that kid, You've already created your own kenjutsu style. So what will you call it? Naruto thought about it for a moment before he smiled. Capoeira aerial. You're going great, Naruto-kun. Rin said as Naruto tried to heal the fish lying on the table in front of him. They were in a spare room of the hospital where Naruto was currently trying to cure a fish of a deadly case of scale rot by using Shaozen no Jutsu, the most basic medical jutsu. Naruto commented that he seemed to heal fast enough without medical jutsu, which he discovered when he was training with Anko, but Rin was adamant, saying that even if he didn't need it, someone on his team could, so he just tried his best to learn the jutsu. He'd been just starting to learn about using medical jutsu in the offensive, using Senbon, chakra scalpels and poisons to bring down the enemy, and he did rather well as it was easy to remember where all the critical points were. Rin had noticed this too, but she just attributed it to Fox's latent knowledge. Naruto saw that the sail rod was starting to recede slowly, so he pushed more chakra into the technique. When the infection completely disappeared but the fish didn't move, Naruto thought he had failed, but that thought was dashed as the fish started to wriggle, gasping for air. Rin smiled as she picked it up and dropped it into the empty tank beside her. That was excellent, Naruto-kun. You're really coming along well. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly and smiled slyly. Thanks, Rin-ne-chan. Rin smiled at the endearment. After all the time they had spent together, Naruto had started calling her, Kurenai, and even Anko his, ne-chans. They didn't mind and even enjoyed it. They knew that Naruto often wondered about his family as they saw him staring at parents with their children when he thought they weren't looking. It was heartbreaking. He had never known any sense of family or friendship before they rescued him from that base, and now that he saw it, he wanted it but just didn't know how to go about getting it. They just had to be the best substitutes they could be for him. Well, she said as she wiped her hands. Now that we're done here, how about we go get us some ramen? Naruto looked at her quizzically. What's ramen? Rin just looked at him in shock for a moment before looping an arm around his shoulder with a huge grin and leading him out the door. I have much to teach you, young one. Naruto sat against a tree in the Sarutobi Gardens. The Hokage had invited him and Kurenai over to dinner to the evening, and Naruto decided that he would read up on some jutsu while he waited. He loved the gardens at the Sarutobi compound and was welcomed there anytime. The Hokage's wife had also taken a shine to him, and also started calling him, Naru-chan. He blamed Anko for that. Currently he was reading up on a variation of the Bunshin no Jutsu called Rai Bunshin no Jutsu, which created a solid clone of the user that when destroyed would revert back into its natural lightning element and shock the attacker. He really couldn't wait till he tried it out, but Rin-ne-chan said that he could only perform Raiden Jutsu when she was there as it could affect his body's electrical current. His thoughts were interrupted as he saw something trying to sneak up on him. Trying being the operative word. Who wouldn't notice a square rock with eyeholes inching towards them in plain sight? He sighed. Come on out, Konohamaru. I know you're there. The rock exploded in a cloud of smoke, and from it emerged a coughing 10-year-old boy wearing a helmet and a long blue scarf. The boy choked and spluttered for a moment, muttering, "Used too much powder," before his gaze settled on a slightly exasperated Naruto. I should have expected you to see through my disguise, rival. Naruto groaned mentally. He didn't mind the kid, but Konohamaru had taken to following him everywhere he went, and it was bordering on stalking. Ever since he saw Naruto land a pretty strong hit on Asuma in training, he had pestered him non-stop to teach him. What do you want, Konohamaru? You know what I want. You need to teach me so I can defeat Gigi and become Hokage. Naruto did groan at that. Now he wouldn't leave him alone until he was taught something he thought he could use against the old man. Naruto was just about to explain again that he couldn't teach the boy anything when a thought occurred to him. Slowly a very evil grin crawled across his face, and Konohamaru couldn't help but feel a little scared. Suddenly Naruto grabbed a piece of spare paper from the book and began to jot down notes as his mind replayed a memory from a few days prior. Flashback no Jutsu. Naruto was walking through the corridors of the Hokage Tower on his way to see the Sandaime. During his time in the village he had become quite close to the old leader and thought him something of a surrogate grandfather. It didn't hurt that the old man had often offered to buy him ramen after Rin had introduced him to the sweet, fatty piece of heaven. Walking up to the door he noticed that it was slightly ajar, so he just walked in. He saw the Sandame sitting in his chair facing the window with a small orange book in his hands and a rather strange blush on his face. His curiosity piqued. He walked up to the desk and tried to see what was in the book, but the Hokage was blocking it. "Hey Sarutobi Gigi, what are you reading?" The Hokage shot out of his chair and spun in the air, trying to see who had snuck up on him. His eyes landed on Naruto, who was confused as to why the strongest ninja in the village was suddenly sweating bullets. Naruto W, what are you doing here? Don't you remember? You said we were going out for ramen today. Sarutobi sighed in relief. What's in the book, Gigi? He started sweating again. He was about to try and bluff his way out of it when the door opened to admit Anko. Hey old man, got any good miss? She broke off upon seeing the book clutched in the Sandame's hands. Sarutobi-sama, whose book is that? She asked with a sickly sweet voice, a creepy smile gracing her features. What do I do? What do I do? Okay, calm down. There has got to be a way out of this. I could, the boy. Sorry about this Naruto, you'll understand one day. Actually Anko, I just confiscated this book from Naruto. I believe that he has been spending too much time with Kakashi and has begun to pick up his bad habits. The Hokage said in his most believable voice. Anko rounded on a confused Naruto. The creepy smile on her face got even creepier. Ah, so Naru-chan likes reading little orange books Well, we'll just have to fix that, won't we? Or rather, fix him. She gripped the back of his shirt and began to grab him out of the office. Come on Naru-chan, we have training. She said in a sing-song voice. Naruto knew that voice and usually associated it with pain. As he was dragged out he glared at the Hokage with a mix of anger, hurt and betrayal. The old traitor wouldn't meet his gaze. Naruto spent the next 4 hours training with Anko, which was basically her kicking his up and down the training field for 4 hours. He spent the next 2 days in his bed for recovery, being lectured the whole time from Kurenai and Rin about not being a pervert despite his protests that he wasn't one. Kakashi and Asuma didn't help any as they kept asking him what he thought of the book and if he had read any others. He swore revenge on the old man. Flashback end no jutsu. And now he was getting that revenge with interest. As he looked over his notes one last time he let out a chuckle that was malice incarnate. He jumped to his feet and pointed to Konohamaru. Konohamaru, are you ready to learn a jutsu that will guarantee that you will defeat your grandfather? Konohamaru had stars in his eyes as he nodded his head vigorously. Okay then, I want you to do exactly as I tell you. Sarutobi walked out the back of the estate and into the gardens to fetch his 2 grandsons for dinner. He felt bad for what he had done to Naruto, but he didn't really have any choice. Anko was one of the worst pervert bashers in the village. Naruto would understand one day. Right. He found the 2 in the far corner of the gardens. Konohamaru was covered in dirt and sweat while Naruto stood by watching him with pride. Konohamaru looked up as his grandfather approached and smiled. This would be the day he defeated him. The young boy leapt to his feet, all previous sighs of exhaustion gone, and looked at Sarutobi with determination. Today is the day that you're going down, old man. Sarutobi sighed. Another attack by his young grandson. This was the 6th time this week. And it was only Tuesday. Konohamaru, must you keep doing this? Ah, the old goat knows his time is at an end and is begging for mercy. Too bad. Waroke no Jutsu. The name should have been warning enough, but Sarutobi was too distracted to care. From the cloud of smoke emerged a very sensuous, very beautiful, very young woman. She had luscious curves and legs that went on forever. Her eyes shone from under her long brown hair as she winked at him. Stop staring, Hokage-sama, I'm shy. She whined cutely. Sarutobi stared for all of 3 seconds before he was launched backwards in a crimson arc of blood gushing from his nose. As he lay on the ground twitching, Konohamaru released the jutsu and started to run around proclaiming that he finally defeated the old man while Naruto was rolling around howling his sides out in laughter. Yo, you just got your handed to you, Gigi, courtesy of Koru-chan. Naruto managed to get out between bursts of laughter. That'll teach you for blaming your perverted little habits on me. Sarutobi crawled to his feet with 2 bloody tissues stuffed up his nose. He couldn't deny that he deserved it, but that didn't mean he had to like it either. Reminding himself to outlaw that jutsu, he beckoned a smiling Konohamaru and a still laughing Naruto to follow him for dinner. Ino sat at the counter of her family's flower shop in a daze. School had let out for the weekend and she was forced to stay indoors and work in the shop. It was a slow day, so Ino did the one thing she could do: fantasize. Currently, in her head, she was in a field with Sasuke kissing tenderly in the high grass. He had just confessed his undying love for her and said that he could never love, forehead girl, as he so romantically put it. The scene changed and she was in the middle of a crowd of girls, all of whom were giving up on Sasuke, saying that they could never compete with her beauty and grace. The scene changed again and she found herself beside a small waterfall watching as a man bathed under the pounding water, water dripping off his muscular frame and his spiky blonde hair framing his deep blue eyes. Wait, blonde. Hey pig. Ino jumped as she was brought out of her reverie, wiping the tiniest hint of blood from her nose. She looked up and saw her former friend, rival Haruno Sakura, enter the store, clad in her usual red dress with her long pink hair spilling down her back. What do you want, forehead? Ino asked.